Chapter 112 Rec September 24, 2018 0:54 and 29 seconds 100%. We aren't trying to pressure you or harass you, Kimberly said. But if you're telling us not to go to the police, you need to tell us why. Start from the beginning. Convince us. Anna sat in one of the more comfortable office chairs, and we all huddled around her, trying not to seem threatening. She looked at the ground, summoning tears, not because of her acting chops but because she was still clearly physically spent and traumatized. "My name is Anna Reed," she said. "I went to Carousel High. Graduated a couple of years ago. Or, I guess not anymore. I was going to a birthday party at the roller rink. It was for a friend of a friend, but you don't ever need an excuse to go skating, right?" "Sure," Kimberly said. We had just started celebrating when the ground started to shake, and pictures started to fall off the walls. She took a moment to breathe deeply. "I was with my friend Camden, and we were near the doors, so we, along with a few other people, ran for it as soon as we felt the tremor." "Wait, are you talking about the roller rink that collapsed in the sinkhole 30 years ago? Up by the airport?" Logan interjected. "Let her talk," Kimberly said. Anna was quiet for a moment. 1992, she said finally. "I thought I was going to die. I thought we all were. We managed to get out into the parking lot when everything started to fall. Everyone behind us, all our friends, all those skaters, they just disappeared. We were on a strip of concrete that was tilting, and it felt like it was about to fall. It was so steep I couldn't walk up it, so I went on all fours and climbed. Camden was right next to me, holding on to me, both of us trying to get a grip, trying to stop the other one from falling. We didn't make it. We got right to the edge, but we didn't make it. I couldn't climb any farther. It was too steep, and the ground I grabbed onto just fell away underneath my hands." In reality, Carousel probably had footage of this happening in real time, but I wanted to give it options, considering all of that footage would have been used in the original film. She paused as a strange look came over her face. "That's when I saw the man. He just walked up casually, like nothing was happening. He could have reached down to grab us. He could have tried to find a rope or something. But he didn't. He was just holding this necklace in his hand and staring at us like he was watching for us to fall into the pit. I didn't know why he wouldn't help us. I got angry. I got scared, for me and Camden. He knelt down so he could get a closer look at us. He was smiling, like he was out on a stroll. So I just reached out as hard as I could and grabbed onto his overcoat that hung down near the ground when he knelt. It was all I could reach. He tried to move out of the way of me, but I grabbed on, and I wouldn't let go. And then the necklace started to glow. The next thing I knew, Camden and I were lying down on the ground, and it was like 2005 or something, I think. There was a building on fire next to us. And then the man started chasing us. I don't know why he wanted us, but he managed to kidnap Camden. I was alone for a while before Camden escaped and found me. He said the guy would find us, there was no running from him. Camden had stolen that box of tapes and the necklace and the book. After he caught up with us and got Camden again, I panicked. I hid those tapes in a place where I thought no one would look for them. I remembered the abandoned courthouse. I thought I could find a way to get back to them before anyone else found them. I didn't mean for you to look at them. But now that you have, he's not going to stop until you're dead. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 24, 2018 1:12 and 8 seconds 100%. Off in another corner of the museum, Logan, Kimberly, and Juan, and I had gone to discuss everything. Bobby had stayed with Anna. "You cannot be seriously believing this," Logan said. "This is just confusing the issue. We still haven't figured out if those tapes are legit. Until we have an explanation, we need to act on the information we have," Kimberly said. "Unless you can come up with a reason that we absolutely need to get the police involved now, instead of tomorrow or 2 days from now, then I suggest we calm down and treat this like a research project. We vet everything she says. If she's telling the truth, we need to document everything. Let's not forget, at the end of the day, we are historians. Logan was clearly frustrated. He had one arm folded across his front and his other hand covering his mouth. Finally, he started to walk off, heading back toward the offices. "What tapes is she talking about?" Ant-Man asked. "Well damn," Logan said. "We have to go over this again." He grabbed Ant-Man and led him away. Kimberly looked at me, unsure of what was going on, but she didn't say anything. Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 24, 2018 1:23 and 58 seconds 100%. "Can you tell me a little bit about how time travel works?" I asked. "Just for the record." Anna thought for a moment. "You need one of these jewels. It doesn't have to be a part of the necklace, but you do need one," she said, pulling a necklace from her pocket with a sizable red jewel attached. "You also need some historical record. I don't know why, but you can only travel to places that had a huge tragedy. You can travel from any place where someone was injured greatly. It doesn't have to be a huge tragedy, but it's easier that way." Wonderful. We were on our way toward a nonsensical time travel plot. I had been hoping for Back to the Future, but it looked like we were getting something more like Donnie Darko, the director's cut. Traveling to places where there were tragedies. Injuring yourselves or others to initiate a jump? Was there going to be a logical reason for that, or was it just for the gore? If it was just about the blood splatter, I could work with it. I preferred some thread of reason, though. "I was wondering more about the time travel logic," I said. "Like, how does time travel deal with a paradox? For example, if you travel back in time and killed your own grandfather, what happens? Or, if you travel back in time with a newspaper saying that we went to the police with these tapes, so we don't go to the police with the tapes, what happens?" "Paradox," Anna said. Camden said something about paradoxes. He said there were none, that was just something in movies. Somehow, in real life, they don't mean much. I didn't say anything for a moment, but then I asked, Camden wouldn't happen to be Dr. Camden, PhD in physics, would he? I needed to hang a lampshade on just how off the wall the rules were. Anna looked confused. "No, he's just a student at the college, like me. He is a physics major, though. He's at the top of the program. Just wondering." Broken vertical bar stop. Rec September 24, 2018 2:53 and 17 seconds 100%. "What did you find?" Kimberly asked. Logan didn't answer at first. "Well?" Kimberly pressed. "I don't have enough information to make any conclusions right now," Logan said, clearly dumbstruck. "I'm not asking you to conclude that time travel is possible. I just want the raw facts," Kimberly said. Logan, sitting at his desk, moved his fingers through his hair and then turned to grab some sheets he had printed off. "I was going through the newspaper archives. Luckily, they are searchable. I also went through some police files after I called up the night clerk at the station. He says that you owe him now, by the way." "Whatever," Kimberly said. "What did you find?" Logan started leafing through the pages he had printed off. There was an Anna Reed who went missing in 1992 after the Carousel roller days sinkhole. Born in 1971. This is her picture. He held up a page he had printed from her high school graduation portrait. "Oh my God," Kimberly said. "That's her." "It's more than that," Logan said. "I found an article in the archives from 1996 about a woman claiming that a photo taken at a crowd crush incident, the one we saw on the film, no doubt, contained Anna Reed, one of her son's friends. Her son's name was..." He shuffled through the papers for a moment. "Gabrielle Cano. Anyway, the article reads as if this woman, Dinah Cano, harassed the writer until he eventually gave up and wrote the article. So that's a second point of confirmation that Anna was not only at the sinkhole but also at the festival 4 years later." "Dinah Cano," Ant-Man said. "I feel like I've seen that name somewhere." "Wait, did you say roller days?" I asked. I walked back over to the wooden crate and pulled out a tape labeled Roller Days. "I haven't seen this one yet," I said. That wasn't true, of course, but in character, I had not seen it. I put the tape into the adapter, booted up my computer, and set the camera so it could capture both my reaction and the reactions of Kimberly, Logan, and Antoine standing behind me. Bobby was watching from a distance, but he wasn't captured on film. I started to play the tape but kept recording, because our reactions were more important than the raw footage. I could film the screen to capture anything important. As the video started playing, Anna walked up next to us to watch. The footage began inside the roller rink, showing two parties, one for a little kid and another for some teenagers. "That's us," Anna said. "I don't remember him being there filming." "He's zoomed in," I said. "He's at the far back of the building. You might not have seen him." The footage cut to some people skating in circles while music played. Then, the scene shifted to the building, filmed from a crop of trees on the other side of the parking lot, where the cameraman could stay hidden. As Anna had reported, a rumbling began, and people started making a mad dash for the exit. Most didn't make it, as the building collapsed almost instantaneously. Anna and Camden were seen running, trying to get to the edge of the parking lot, but the asphalt was ripping out of place and falling into the earth as they ran. They almost reached the edge, just as Anna had described. "He's not walking over there like you said he would," Kimberly observed. "He's just standing there filming." "Wait," Anna said. We did wait, watching as Anna, Camden, and two others around their age struggled to survive and avoid falling to their doom. As the dust settled, a man briskly walked from out of frame toward a spot near Anna and Camden. "It's him," Kimberly said. "I thought he was the one recording." There were multiple, of course. Everything played out exactly as Anna had described, though she had not seen everything. "Look," I pointed out. As one of the partygoers behind Anna fell into the pit, another did not. This third character stayed in contact with Camden. Suddenly, a red glow emanated from the man's hand as he struggled to get Anna to let go of his trench coat. The man, Anna, Camden, and the third character, who must have been Gabriel Cano, all flickered out of existence. "I don't remember him being there," Anna said. "He wasn't with us where we ended up." "I had no idea." "Cano," Antoine said. "I know where I read that. He left the office immediately and walked down the hall." Logan, clearly numb from his inability to reconcile the supernatural events he was witnessing, asked, "Do you have that necklace he was holding onto right now?" "I have one of them," Anna said, pulling the necklace from her pocket. "May I?" Logan asked, gesturing for her to hand it over. She reluctantly complied. "Just one moment," Logan said, returning to his workstation. Antoine came back into the room carrying a thick stack of letters. "I knew I'd seen the name Dinah Cano before," he said. He turned the letters around, and sure enough, they were addressed from Dinah Cano to the museum. We were really popping off with revelations because, right after Antoine revealed that, Logan came back over from his desk. "Do you know what this jewel is?" he asked, holding up the jeweled necklace. "A ruby," Kimberly guessed. "Red sapphire," Bobby offered. "A blood diamond," I joked. Logan shot me a glance like he might laugh but returned to what he was saying. "This is a piece of meteorite." I zoomed in on the necklace. At a glance, it did appear to be a ruby, but on closer inspection, it had a glassy, jewel-like exterior interlaced with metallic streaks. "How do you know that?" Kimberly asked. "Because he had a trap for identifying things, especially expensive things." "Because I used to work at the main museum a few blocks over, at the site of the Carousel River Valley meteor strike," Logan said with great emphasis. "I worked with the scientists who studied it." As if to echo his sentiment, I got up and walked out to the main museum floor. There, I found a large display showing a map of the Carousel River Valley. Smack dab in the middle, in the place where the town had been built, where the original Carousel settlement had stood, was the impact site of that very meteor. Broken vertical bar stop chapter 113 Rec September 24, 2018 9:02 and 38 seconds 100%. It's time to see what it's like on the other side of the museum industry, I said as we walked into the building right next to Town Hall. This museum had an exhibit on the very meteor that struck Carousel nearly 300 years prior. We were going to try to learn everything about it that we could. It was just Bobby, Kimberly, Logan, and me. Antoine volunteered to stay with Anna to help keep her safe. What kind of research would we actually find in the museum? If the meteor fragments that had been turned into the amulet truly had time travel properties, I doubted they would have a placard that said so. Still, we made our way directly to the exhibit on the meteor. It was the largest and most impressive exhibit there. In fact, the area covering the meteor looked suspiciously like a planetarium, as if some all-powerful entity had just copy-pasted one into this building. Up above us, a colorful sculpture of the meteor could be seen. We did a guided tour. A petite, blonde tour guide nearby named Ashley gave us a good overview. "Welcome to our exhibit on the Carousel River Valley meteor. This extraordinary meteor struck the center of the Carousel settlement in 1743, destroying everything man-made within a 10-mile radius. What it left behind was a collection of fragments unlike anything ever seen. The largest piece was roughly the size of a small car, while smaller shards were scattered throughout the area. Even the soil here still carries traces of the meteor's particulates. If you'd like to see what these fragments looked like, we've prepared detailed recreations in the next exhibit room. You'll find a life-sized model of the largest fragment, along with smaller shard replicas and a display showing how the blast spread material into the surrounding area. It's a fascinating glimpse into one of history's most destructive events. Follow me, and let's take a closer look." Before the tour guide could move to the other room, Logan said, "Excuse me, but I was wondering if you knew where the actual pieces of the meteorite are." Ashley looked at him and blushed. If you'll look at the back of the tour group, you'll see Dr. Logan Mays, one of the museum system's most decorated historians, and a bit of a troublemaker. Logan waved, not quite expecting that reaction. "The real fragments are kept in a lab underneath the museum for testing and safekeeping," Ashley said to the group before leading the group into the next room. Logan's character should have had some idea where the originals were, but he couldn't find that information. He just had to bite the bullet and ask. He was a good actor and managed to play it off as if he had been flirting with her. We continued to mill about the museum, looking for any exhibit or sign that might explain more about the meteor or its strange properties, but we didn't find any. All the information we had was very surface level. Luckily, we were employees of the museum system. We found the entrance to the employees-only section and easily made our way inside by flashing our badges. We might not have been employees of that museum, but it was all one large organization funded by the same benefactor in conjunction with the Carousel city government. Unfortunately, the employee section wasn't much more helpful. There was no display case with all the real fragments of the meteorite just sitting around waiting for us to stare at them. There wasn't an advanced section revealing all the true information about the meteorite. There was a cafeteria, though, one specifically for the employees. We sat at one of the tables, and we all leaned in so Logan could whisper to us. According to the museum database, the actual meteorite is on loan, or at least that's the designation it was given. I can't figure out where it was lent. However, I do happen to know the guy who was in charge of researching it. He still works here, Logan said. All of this information was what we could find in the database for the museum system. But since Logan's character was supposed to be the major historian, we thought he should be the one to relay it. So we waited in the cafeteria. It took 30 minutes. There he is, Logan said. He always stops to get a cup of coffee. I doubt that's changed. Although, if memory serves, his idea of coffee is mostly milk and sugar. He was ad-libbing, using information he had gathered from different places and wielding it to create a useful narrative. He knew the name of the guy from the database, and his character had received a birthday email from someone with that same name. I followed his eyeline with the camera to show a short, bald man with thick glasses and a cheerful face. Logan held up a hand and said, "Roger." The man turned and saw Logan, a smile growing on his face. "Logan," the man said cheerfully as he walked over, shifting his briefcase from one hand to the other to extend a handshake. "I heard you got put in the jailhouse. On account of my rough and tumble past, I'm sure," Logan said as he shook the man's hand. The two men laughed. "So, what are you doing here?" Roger asked. "Believe it or not, I'm actually here to see you." "Me?" Roger asked. "What do you need to see me for? I told you that poker game was not for real money." Logan laughed. "We're doing an exhibit on the Carousel River Valley meteor strike, and I seem to recall you being the foremost expert on the entire thing." Roger smiled. "The only people who know more about it than me are the ones who got crushed by it," he joked. We all laughed, a lot of laughing in this horror film. "Say, what exactly does a crime museum need an exhibit on the meteor for?" Roger asked. The gig was up. We could come up with some excuse. After all, the jailhouse was built on the cornerstone of the original jailhouse wiped out by the blast, but that was a tenuous connection. Logan was about to relay that reasoning when, luckily, Roger spoke again. "Oh, you must be talking about Grant Leitner." Logan, taking the lifeline, said, "Exactly. Well, I'm sure I could rustle up some info. You know, we used to have an exhibit out here in the main museum, but then somebody upstairs realized it was a bad idea to advertise one of the biggest museum thefts in the history of Carousel," Roger said. More laughing. Roger checked his watch and said, "Well, I can look in my files and shoot you over anything I find." "That would be great," Logan said. "Another thing, when I was looking into this, the database said we don't actually have the meteorite fragments anymore." "Don't tell me we sold them." A sour look appeared on Roger's face. "Don't get me started on that whole mess," he said. "I worked on that meteor for 14 years, and then we loaned it out. Turned out this other group had some fragments of it themselves, and suddenly they needed every piece for their research. I still get burnt up just thinking about it. All I've got left to study is dust." "That's how it is, isn't it?" Logan said. "The guy with the checkbook gets to control our history and our science." "Damn right," Roger said. "And that is so frustrating because the implications of my findings were monumental." Finally, on a topic he was passionate about, Roger sat down next to us. After a brief greeting, he launched into a diatribe about the things he had discovered about the meteorite and its unique properties. He gave anecdotes about his experiments and day-to-day projects in the lab. "Put it to me straight," Logan said. "What is special about this meteorite?" Roger scratched his chin and said, "We conducted extensive tests to determine the elemental composition of the fragments, everything from spectrometry to crystallographic analysis. While all the fragments are made of the same base material, each one exhibits slight, measurable variations in its quantum resonance profile and isotopic decay rate. These differences are so consistent, yet distinct, that they caught the attention of Kinetic Research Systems laboratories back in the '70s. They've been requisitioning more and more pieces of the damn thing ever since. I was studying the material for a groundbreaking project, developing a clock that could theoretically function with absolute precision, unaffected by phenomena like time dilation or relativistic distortions. I imagine that's what the Carousel science monkeys are doing now. They even got my notes. The unique properties of the fragments, their isochronous decay patterns and resistance to external temporal fluctuations, make them an ideal candidate for such a device. If the material lives up to its potential, it wouldn't just keep time, it would redefine it. Imagine a chronometer so stable it could remain synchronized across any condition in the known universe, perhaps even anchoring itself to some universal constant we've yet to discover. That's the level of precision we're looking at here. We left physics behind and entered quantum physics. It had been a while since we had seen proper science babble. And they're not going to credit you, are they? Logan asked. They aren't going to have a choice, Roger said. Once I'm through with my research on this dust, I'm going to publish. They like to keep their experiments all secret. My principles are different. I think this knowledge belongs to everyone. The conversation wound down after a few minutes, and Roger asked if we were going to release the recording. I assured him we wouldn't release the footage until after he published. Roger, as an NPC, was quite a good actor and summoned a passion for his diatribe rarely seen in Carousel. We got what we came for, though we didn't exactly know what that was. Broken vertical bar stop. Off-screen. Roger's email had already arrived by the time we got back to the jailhouse. It contained an article about a theft from the museum over 50 years prior. Janitor shoots officer, vanishes after stealing meteorite necklace. July 15, 1964. Grant Leitner, a 21-year-old janitor at the Carousel Central Museum, is on the run after allegedly stealing the Starlight pendant, a necklace crafted from the famed Carousel meteorite, and shooting a police officer who attempted to apprehend him. The theft occurred late Friday night when Leitner was caught removing the ruby-like pendant, known for its metallic streaks and extraordinary craftsmanship, from its display case. Authorities quickly responded, cornering Leitner within the museum's memorial to the Carousel Valley quake of 1947. Despite being surrounded, Leitner managed to elude capture. Before escaping, Leitner shot and injured Officer Michael Grady, who is now recovering in stable condition, though there is uncertainty about whether he will regain the use of his legs. "It's a miracle no one else was harmed," said Police Chief Frank Callahan. "We are dedicating every resource to finding Leitner and recovering the stolen artifact." The Starlight pendant has been a centerpiece of the museum's collection for decades. "It's irreplaceable, both in its history and its beauty," said curator Nevin Marks. Despite extensive searches, Leitner's whereabouts remain unknown, leaving the community shaken and the museum mourning the loss of one of its most prized possessions. The article came with 2 pictures. The first was a high school graduation photo of Grant Leitner. "That's our guy," Logan said as we looked at the picture. Sure enough, the high school student in the photo was the spitting image of the man we had seen reflected in the window in one of the videos. Anna said the red wallpaper called him Generation Killer. The other photo was of the Starlight pendant. "That's not it," Kimberly said. "Anna, come here. Look at this. Let me see that necklace." Anna handed her the necklace with its ruby red jewel on the end. Sure enough, the necklaces didn't match. Even the size of the meteor fragment looked off. "What gives?" Kimberly asked. With sudden inspiration, I ran back to my desk and opened up footage I had taken of the daylight dance disaster. I started scanning through it. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before, or maybe it hadn't been there before. "Look at this," I said. The others came over, and I played the video for them slowly, showing the moments right before the stage collapsed and then those right after. "See?" I said. "There he is." Sure enough, there was another copy of Grant Leitner walking up the steps from the stage. He was also still there filming a few meters away. "No, he's over there," Ant-Man said, pointing to a different part of the screen. And sure enough, another man was wearing the same overcoat and the same hat, walking in a different direction away from the stage. I couldn't attest to whether it was actually him, but it was certainly a similar outfit. "They're here," Kimberly said. "They came here. We have a fight on the way." "That's probably why they filmed these disasters," I said. "That's why they need these tapes, because it allows them to see who's in what time period at any given time. The tapes will change when people travel there. Not that they could really tell which of them was there." "Well, Cassie said they were being chased," Bobby said. She had. We scanned through the footage for another 10 minutes and managed to find 2 other images of what we thought was Grant Leitner aka Generation Killer. Finally, I found the type of image I was looking for, one where he was very close, and I could get a good shot of him. "This is exactly what I was hoping to find," I said. "Look at this, look at his hand." I zoomed in on the computer as much as it would go. Sure enough, on his left hand, he had a ring with a ruby red jewel on the end. I smiled and turned to the others. "That's the ticket," I said. "I just figured it out." "Figured what out?" Anna asked. I may be a bit closer to understanding what Camden meant when he said no paradoxes. Before I could even explain to them what I meant by that, we received troubling news. Logan, on a hunch, had retrieved the newspaper Anna had brought from the future. "It changed," he said. He turned it around to show us. The paper was from the next day. Crime museum staff slaughtered, others missing. A shock went through my system. Somehow, in unfolding the rules of time travel and trying to understand the premise of this story, I had forgotten the simple fact that this was a torture and murder storyline. I remembered now. "We have to get this on film," Anna said. "This article says we only have about 12 hours. And I promise, you cannot run from him. Not the normal way." "Sue. Time travel?" Bobby asked. Anna nodded. We all looked at each other, and I said, "Great Scott. First blood was upon us. In fact, it may have already happened." Chapter 114. We were getting spoiled by having a camera that we could control. After a few minutes of prepping and getting ready, we ran back through everything we had just spoken about. This time on screen. We were doing our best to give the reactions we felt the information deserved. The meteor shards are all different, oh my goodness. The bad guy used to work at the other museum, and he stole a pendant with part of the meteor on it. How scandalous. Anna was doing her best to stay positive and keep up with us. Truthfully, she didn't have as much experience as we did, and I could see her start to feel a little overwhelmed as we fell into our characters and communicated so easily. "Everything is going to be okay," Kimberly had told her. "No matter how well you do, it doesn't matter. We just have to get to the end." And that was something I needed to remember, too. We didn't need a home run. We just needed to get on base, or maybe some other sports metaphor. As long as we finished this storyline, everything would be okay. It was so easy to second-guess yourself. Were we overcomplicating things with our plan? I had no idea, but Sal had made it clear that we needed to include some time travel shenanigans, or else we would go straight to DVD and all that implied. I just hoped that Carousel liked our taste in shenanigans. Rec September 24th, 2018 13:15 and 26 seconds 80%. "Look at this," Logan said, holding the future newspaper. We had just examined the footage of the daylight dance again and discovered that there were multiple different versions of the meteorite shard and some fedora-wearing killers holding them. The newspaper article changed. He turned the newspaper around, and I got a good view of the title for the camera. Crime museum staff slaughtered, others missing. "Let me see that," Kimberly said, grabbing the paper and reading the article. Museum employees Kimberly Madison, Logan Mays, Lila White, and Riley Lawrence are among those deceased or missing, she read aloud. "Wait," she said. "Lila doesn't know anything about this. She's not a part of it." She looked up at Logan. "I don't think Lila has been in for work today," he said. After a quick glance over to Lila's desk, Kimberly started rushing off toward the old police station part of the museum where Lila worked. I followed behind. "Lila!" Kimberly called out. No answer. She continued walking, and when we got there, we saw Lila's little corner fingerprinting station had not been set up for the day, and the doors had not been opened. Kimberly looked around in a panic. "I'm going to go call her," she said. But then I said, "Wait. What? Do you hear that?" Kimberly and the others were silent as the grave. In the distance, there was the sound of metal clanging. I followed the sound with the camera over into the dark part of the museum where the original courthouse had been. As I walked into the room, the clanging got louder and louder. "What is that?" I said aloud. I walked further until I got to the entrance to the courthouse, which had long been boarded up, except, of course, for the mail slot. I turned the camera and zoomed in on the slot. A little metal door banged as someone tried to shove something through it but struggled because whatever it was just slightly too big. The slot cover could not open all the way. Eventually, they figured it out and got their package to slide through. I cautiously walked over and zoomed down on it, and from its shape, I guessed what it was. "It looks like another tape," I said. "Wait, is he here right now?" And one asked from behind me, and I could hear him running back down the hallway. The windows in this room were boarded up, so there was no way to see who had delivered the package. I grabbed the package, and just from the feel of it, I could tell that it was a videotape. Then I began to run after N1 as he went toward the proper entrance of the building and out onto the street. We looked around at all the people downtown until N1 locked eyes with one of them, who was in the right place to have just been at the front of the courthouse. N1 ran up to him, grabbed his shoulder, turned him around, and saw that it was a courier. Carousel Courier Services. CCS was emblazoned on his jacket. "What's your deal, man?" the guy said, clearly afraid. "Did you just deliver a package to the old courthouse?" "Yeah, why?" the guy said. "Who sent it?" Ant-Man asked. "I don't know," the guy said. "They don't tell me that kind of stuff. Look, it was an old package scheduled for shipment years ago. I can't just give random people details. You can call the office. Just let me go." Ant-Man let go of the guy's shoulder and threw up his hands in a pacifying gesture. "Sorry," he said. "I thought you were someone else." As soon as Ant-Man let go of him, the courier ran off. Ant-Man turned and saw Kimberly. "I'm sorry," he said. "This has just got me on edge." "I understand," Kimberly said. "I'm so sorry you got dragged into this. Bet you're really wishing you didn't stay behind to do your insurance paperwork, huh?" I asked. Ant-Man rolled his eyes. "I was just doing it so I didn't have to come in today because I was thinking about taking my boat out on the water. It's crazy how life ends up." Back inside, Kimberly opened the package and revealed a tape with the words "fingerprints" written on it. It was definitely about Lila, as she had worked the fingerprint booth. Bobby re-entered the room just as I was getting the tape loaded onto the computer. "The doors are all locked," he said. "The worst part about being hunted by a time-traveling serial killer," I said, "is that it turns out the time-traveling serial killer doesn't know that fingerprints is one word." As soon as I had everything working, I press play. Broken vertical bar stop. Play January 3rd, 1997 8:12 and 37 seconds. The video opened with Lila sitting in a chair, bound and crying. She was facing the camera, but her eyes were off to the left. I wasn't sure what she was looking at until she started to speak. She was reading. "I caught your little friend. She couldn't run from me," she said, tears running down her cheeks. "Please just let me go, I won't tell anyone," she begged. "Read the words," a man's voice said. Lila continued. "I just want the tapes. I need to make sure that they don't fall into the wrong hands, you understand? Those were for my use, not yours. No one else has to get hurt. Just leave the tapes out on the sidewalk tonight, and I'll leave you be. But if you try to screw me over, you'll be history." Lila continued to cry. She suddenly seemed to notice him doing something off-screen. She yelled, "He's lying to you. He says he wants to kill all of you." Suddenly, a rush could be heard from behind the camera. Lila screamed loudly. Something hit the camera and knocked it away from the view of Lila. All we could hear was the screaming, and I saw a bright red light glowing. But before anything else, broken vertical bar stop. I stopped the tape. And with that, the first blood had passed. I turned around to the others who had been watching the video with me. "Ready for the next part?" I asked. Most of them nodded or at least acknowledged what I said. "I'll go get Lila," Bobby said. And he did. Lila was waiting in the other room. When Lila walked back and behind Bobby, her dead status was lit up. Dying last scream really was a useful trop. Not only did she have the dead status, but she was also on death watch, which worked a lot differently for wallflowers. The gist was that she could follow us and watch what was happening as long as she stayed out of frame. The camera had cut away because, with the dead status, she couldn't be harmed by an enemy, she couldn't be targeted directly at all. That was the primary benefit that Dead had overwritten off or off-screen, assuming you were alive when you got it. "Are you okay?" Kimberly asked. "Did he hurt you?" Lila shook her head. "Not too bad," she said. "You need to tell us everything," Logan said. "Anything that you can give us would be really helpful." Lila nodded. She took a moment to collect herself and think about what had happened. We all gathered around her and waited. He kidnapped me off the street on my way to work this morning. I ran, but they eventually caught me. I didn't know when he was going to show up, but he waited until I was almost here. There were 3 of them. They took me to a warehouse that was abandoned and tied me up. One of them filmed." She paused, rubbing a bruise forming on her forehead. "I was scared, but I knew that if they started anything, I could just do the dying scream, and it would be over, so I was okay. After I screamed, they just pretended I was dead. They had this book, like the one that Anna brought, and they had their red jewels, and they just kind of disappeared." "I'm sorry if this isn't helpful," she said. "No, that's great," Kimberly said. "Did they all have different red jewels?" I asked. Lila thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she said. "One of them had a bracelet, another had a necklace, and then the third guy, he just carried it around in his hand, kept it wrapped in a cloth." "How are they as threats? What level are they?" Logan asked. "What weapons did they use?" "They didn't carry weapons that I saw," she said. "They just used stuff they found on the ground. I think one of them might have had a gun, but he never showed it. He just kept gesturing like he was going to pull it out of his jacket if I didn't tell him stuff. One was level 28, and the other 2 were level 35 and level 39. I just wished that I could have gotten a glimpse of them to see their tropes. The truth was, they didn't sound that dangerous." "So what was the angle? What made them a threat? Can you tell me about them as people?" Kimberly asked. "They are all just the same guy." Lila thought for a moment. "Well, they have a lot of scars. Big scars, not little scars. One of them rolled up his sleeves, it was awful. Another one had a scar on his chest like he had heart surgery or something, I don't know. But the thing was, they were different. They were 3 different people." "What do you mean by that?" Kimberly asked. "They were all unique? Different ages?" Lila shook her head. "No," she said, staring into the distance as if straining to remember. "They were around the same age. One of them smoked. The other 2 didn't. He offered them a cigarette, but it wasn't a real offer, it was like he was trying to annoy them. One of them was smart and in charge, and then the third one was not very smart. The other 2 just ordered him around." "I bet the third one wrote the label on the tape," I said under my breath. For the first time, Anna interjected. Camden thought that they were just all the same guy at different ages. "Is it possible that they just have an ambiguous age?" Lila shook her head. "No. They all looked like they were in their late 20s. They talked about another one of them that they called the old man, and some guy called our brother in time or something. 'We gotta get this done quick or the old man's gonna have a coronary,' she quoted. "Maybe things changed because this is a soft reboot," I said. "Maybe Camden just guessed wrong," Logan said. "Anything was possible." "Did they say anything else?" Kimberly asked. "Anything at all might be useful." Lila thought for a moment. "Like I said in the video, they are definitely going to kill everyone who saw those tapes," Lila said. "In fact, the way they phrased it was weird. They said they have to kill us before word gets out." "Before word gets out," I said. "That's very specific. I'm betting that was one of the original win conditions, making sure the right people found out about the time traveler. In Carousel, there were lots of different win conditions, but after you had played enough storylines, you started to see patterns. Sometimes, it was defeat the enemy or escape. The one for this story was survive the night. Just because get the word out was no longer a win condition didn't mean it wasn't important information. We knew they were running from someone. Lila would be around as the story progressed. She could use her death watch to follow us from soundstage to soundstage, helping in the background. Because Carousel used soundstages to simulate time travel, she could be very useful. The first thing we wanted her to do was find Dinah and make sure everything was okay with her. So we sent her on her way as we got ready for shenanigans. Chapter 115 Rec September 24th, 2018 14:02 and 47 seconds 60%. There was an uproar in the office as we all reacted to the tape of Lila being murdered for the audience. We needed this to be the moment things got real. The bad guy had yet to reveal himself to us in person. It might be difficult to justify extreme reactions by the characters until they can no longer deny the situation. The fact that Lila was killed off-screen didn't help. "I've got family out of town," Ant-Man said. "I'm packing a bag and getting out of here." "No," Anna said firmly. "They will always get you." "What do you think the first thing we tried was?" "Leaving town." Kimberly stared in disbelief at the tape, having just witnessed one of her employees and friends being murdered. Logan was also in disbelief. "We didn't actually see her get killed, right? So she might be fine," he said, grasping for hope. He really played the "this could all be an elaborate prank" angle very well. Bobby sat silently, seemingly contemplating his life while petting his dogs. "Well, what are you suggesting?" Ant-Man asked. "We run from them through time," Anna said. "Camden said they are very particular about how they travel through time. We can slip away." "Why do we have to keep hearing about what Camden says?" Ant-Man asked, frustration in his voice. Everything he knew didn't manage to help him. "He sacrificed himself for me," Anna said. "Don't you understand that? He was held captive by them for days. He studied them. He understands what's going on better than we can. So let's just go ask him," I said. "What?" Kimberly asked, incredulous. "Let's go ask this guy, Camden," I clarified. "I mean, we have a magic time travel jewel. Time travel seems to work on bonkers rules, but we know enough to use them, so why not?" There was a pause as everyone seemed to consider. "You can't be serious," Logan said. "I am serious," I replied. "Don't you get why they want these tapes? I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but why would they make the tapes in the first place? They need them to see who's time traveling with them. The tapes will change, right? That's how this works. That's what happened with the newspaper. The tapes change to show who arrives at each event. They don't have the tapes, and for some reason, they can't just go back in the past and grab them before we do, or else they would have done that already. So let's take the tapes, run to the past, and they won't be able to follow us." "You don't know that," Logan countered. "They could very well have other copies of the tapes. They just don't want us to have them too. They might be worried that we're going to expose them, which we totally should do. Surely there's someone who will care that time-traveling serial killers exist? Oh dear God, what am I saying? Surely someone will care that some deluded murderer is running around, regardless." "Maybe Camden knows who will care," I said. "Because I hate to break it to you, but our original selves did go to the cops, and they got murdered for it." Logan was at his limits, trying to deal with his unbelievable circumstances. "Okay, there's something else you didn't think of," he said. "Do you know how this time travel works? In order to travel, you need to be near a tragic event where a lot of people die, or you need to maim someone. That's what the girl says. Did you think of that? Are you ready to maim someone because you think you can travel through time? What if it doesn't work? What if this is all just a lie, and we end up hurting someone thinking we're going to prevent the Kennedy assassination? I, for one, don't want to be in that predicament." He was good at this part. "Stop arguing," Kimberly said, holding up the newspaper. "According to this article, we are only hours from getting killed." I grabbed the newspaper from her and sat down to read, keeping the camera on and facing me while the others continued their conversation. Antoine lamented having gotten caught up in this for no good reason. He sat against the wall, wide-eyed in disbelief. "My name isn't in that paper, is it?" he asked. "They don't even know I'm here. Why don't I just go home, and you can call me and tell me how things go?" "If you believed that, you wouldn't be here," Logan said. "You would have run the first time you saw one of those tapes." He sat on a desk, trying to project some kind of apathy or calm, but his leg was swinging under him in a nervous gesture. I read through the paper, glancing over the article about our murders, and then decided to peruse the rest of it, because, after all, who wouldn't want to read tomorrow's paper today? "Who are we even going to hurt?" Logan said. "Do we have a volunteer?" Someone who wants their fingers chopped off because somehow the magic gemstone demands it? What are we even talking about here? Anna had her hand on her hip and was doing her best to stay strong. She stood between us all. It's about making a disruption in the timeline, Anna explained. It's not that crazy if you think about it. A serious injury will create huge ripples in the time stream. That's what Camden said. This Camden fellow better be the smartest bastard that ever lived, Ant-Man said. The way we're trusting our lives with him. No kidding. We could draw straws, Bobby suggested, in a demeanor that suggested he wasn't all that bothered by our situation. Loser takes the sacrifice. The rest of us travel back in time. No, everybody gets to travel back in time, even the injured, Anna said. They just have to be touching each other. Oh, well, that's not as bad as I thought, Bobby said. Not as bad as you thought, Logan repeated, standing up straight. One of us is going to have to get permanently injured, and we don't even know why. I told you, Anna said. It's because an injury creates a disruption in the timeline. Time wants to kick you off the timeline whenever you change the way things are supposed to be, and with the amulet, you can leave and go anywhere. No, you can only go to some pre-selected place where the enemy is sitting and waiting with videotape, Logan said. According to the rules you gave us. Wait, I interjected. I stood up with the paper, careful to make sure I stayed in the shot. What if we didn't have to injure ourselves to go back in time? That caught them off guard. This was a new idea I had just come up with. But you have to, Anna said. You either have to cause an injury that wasn't supposed to exist, or you have to be at the location of a huge disaster where lots of people die, causing the timeline to branch. I held up a hand in acknowledgement. Okay, I said. Just hear me out. If causing an injury creates some weird jumping point in time so that you can go somewhere else, wouldn't preventing an injury do the same thing? Anna thought for a moment. It might, she admitted. But how are we going to prevent an injury that's already supposed to happen? I flipped open the paper and put it down on the desk in front of me. Well, we could just read tomorrow's paper. Falling bricks gravely injure AD executive was one of the articles in the paper. Kimberly looked down at it and said, that's about 2 hours from now. Logan grabbed the paper and read through it. You don't know if that'll work, Logan said. Just tell me, I said, because I've forgotten. Do you believe that this is all real or not? For someone who doesn't believe in any of this, you seem to be policing the rules. If this doesn't work, we can fall back to our option of drawing straws to see whose fingers get chopped off. Everyone sort of looked at each other, gauging each other's reactions. Granted, Logan said. But there's one thing you haven't thought about. And what's that? I asked. Say we do travel back in time to rescue this Camden kid. Won't we just be traveling to a point in time where the bad guy has already traveled? Not only will he be there with a camera waiting for us, there are way more events in the book than there are films, I interrupted. We can just find one that wasn't filmed. Hear me out, Logan said. We don't know anything. Shouldn't we take a moment to think about where we're supposed to be traveling to in time? Logan was using his voice of dissent trop left and right, bolstering our plans and giving us friction so we could have a lively debate. We need to go to a point after Camden had escaped capture from the time clones. That way, he knows all the information we need, I said. What was the sequence of events? Anna opened the book and pointed to a disaster involving college kids recklessly, and accidentally, harming themselves in the woods. The bizarre event left cops scratching their heads and disrupted some citizens working on their vacation home. That's where we went, Anna said. It gave us a couple of days to prepare. Then there was another accident, but I think it was a houseboat. I can't remember. That's where the killers came. Camden called him Generation Killer. So it's easy, Ant-Man said. We just show up at the same time Anna and Camden did, and we get to Anna's in one Camden. Now we're back to the question of whether paradoxes exist, Logan said. If we show up at the same time that Anna and Camden originally did in 2010 after they escaped the Generation Killer, then Anna can never hide the tapes, and we never find out about them. I was not sure we should point that out. Forcing Carousel to use actual logical time travel would not be in anyone's favor. Camden talked about paradoxes not existing, but I don't know the details, Anna admitted. He might have meant something else. There was no way that paradoxes didn't exist in some form. What kind of time travel movie had no consequences for creating logical contradictions in the timeline? I had to ask him what he meant by that. We paused and thought for a moment. I sensed they were waiting for me to speak. Well, we can't risk it, I said. It might be true that these meteorite fragments prevent a time traveler from disappearing after they create a grandfather paradox, but that doesn't mean a time traveler can't create a paradox at all. After all, we're using the exact same jewel that you and Camden did. It's possible that there would be a paradox. I hated this rules-guessing game. If only we could ask Camden, Ant-Man said. We can't arrive at the same time they do, I said. We need to find a way to rescue Camden without preventing Anna from escaping, which led to the event where we discovered the tapes. Do we? Ant-Man asked under his breath, loud enough for others to hear. We needed people to be skeptical, but we didn't need to give that line of thought more oxygen than necessary. Well, we have two options, Kimberly said. We either show up after the college kids die in the woods, or we show up after the houseboat sinks. We assume, Logan said. Huh? I asked. We don't know if that's the only disaster that happened around that time frame. All we're going off of is, well, this book, which I'm going to guess Generation Killer wrote himself, though he never put his name in it. Logan ran over to his workstation and got on his computer. All I have to do is search for some sort of disaster or other buzzword similar to that during the same period, he said. Well, he was born in the single-quote 40s, I said. He probably isn't up to date on Boolean search methods. He could have missed a disaster. Logan typed into the computer several times, which took him a few minutes. In reality, he had already made the search and had it waiting in another tab. Nothing, Logan said. No other mass death incidents in that time period in 2010. Sounds like we're back to square one. It was starting to look like Carousel was rejecting our rescue Camden plan. Wait a second, I said. Why can you only travel to moments where lots of people died? Anne shook her head. Because those are points in time where timelines diverge harshly, creating turbulence, like in a river. Camden had a whole speech about it. Mass death is so significant that it splits a timeline in two more than normal events. I looked at Logan, and he looked back at me. We smiled. I picked up the camera and walked toward him. If you can't find a mass death event that Generation Killer didn't list in the book or film, we find a near miss, Logan said, finishing my thought. Exactly, I said. Wait, what? Kimberly asked. Well, timelines are complex, I explained. If the only points at which timelines split in a meaningful way are moments where lots of people die, then they must also split at points where lots of people almost die. That makes sense, Bobby said, standing up and following us. Just because we are in the timeline where the people didn't die doesn't mean that the branching never occurred. Exactly, I said. The split would still be there. We're just on the better side of it. Where was a dry erase board when you needed one? Can we be sure that would work? Ant-Man asked. No, I admitted. But we can always have a backup plan. If this doesn't work, we could go to another mass death event, something that isn't where we're trying to go, but that also isn't inside his book. Good thinking, Logan said. Here, look at this. The day before the Red Hills massacre in 2010 with the college kids, a drag racer nearly plowed into a crowd at an illegal street race in southern Carousel. There were as many as 50 people in the crowd, and the driver's quick thinking and expert maneuvering prevented what would have surely been a disaster. The driver died, but he managed to avoid hitting anyone. It was exhilarating, like we were chasing Carousel around a tree, trying to find some way for our plans to work. And we might just have found it. I'll also look up a backup, Logan said. Some disaster where people did die, but Generation Killer didn't know about. Are we sticking with Generation Killer as a name? I feel like we could pick something better. We made our plans, and Carousel made countermeasures. With time travel as a weapon, I shivered at the thought of all the terrible consequences it could dream up. We would surely find out soon. Broken vertical bar stop chapter 116 Rec September 24th, 2018 16:48 and 13 seconds 100%. It's not anything to be nervous about, Anna said, though I could tell that she was nervous even as she said it. It's not like a blink and you miss it kind of thing. You can feel it happening. As long as you've got this necklace with you, you can feel yourself start to slip. It was a bright and beautiful day. People were out walking their dogs, which distracted Bobby's two hounds, but they never disobeyed him. They sat eagerly, awaiting his next command, straining against the script in hopes of getting a sniff of something in the wind. Kids were playing at a playground next to a daycare center across the street. 6 people from different walks of life stood on a sidewalk, waiting for a man in a blue suit to walk next to the historic mercantile building, at which point bricks would fall from the roof, striking and severely injuring him. Nothing to see. Just an everyday, ordinary thing. Strangers hanging out. The nerves were palpable. I mostly focused on getting shots of the street. It was really nice out, and I knew that these shots would make a valuable juxtaposition for what had come before and what would surely come next. When is this guy supposed to show up? Ant-Man asked. He was carrying his duffel bag filled with a variety of goodies, from firearms to construction tools, whatever we might need. It should be any minute, Kimberly said. About 5 minutes, actually, Logan added. How can you know that? Kimberly asked. In the picture of him being taken away on the stretcher in the article, you could see that the shadow of the building was on that fire hydrant. I figure with people around, the ambulance was probably called immediately and couldn't have taken more than a few minutes to get here with the hospital so close. Given where the shadow of the building is now and where it is in the photograph, I'd say we have about 5 minutes. He was holding onto a printout of the news article. He had printed out several other articles. I walked up to him and aimed the camera at the sheets in his hands. Ingredient number 1, I said. A historical document memorializing an event in the timeline. Logan turned the papers and shuffled through them to show the article about the drag race where things almost got deadly, well, more deadly. Ingredient number 2, I said, moving the camera over toward Anna, who held the necklace with the ruby red jewel on the end. Magic space rock. Highly decorative. Anna didn't look directly into the camera. She just looked at me as if annoyed or unsure about my presence. That was probably the best way to handle it. I had to get footage, a variety of footage at that, so that Carousel would have something to cut together in hopes that the audience might miraculously understand the rules of the storyline. But in order to get the terribly invasive, repetitive footage, I was going to have to do cameraman things, like getting close into people's personal space and expositing in a humorous, if annoying, way. I got footage of Bobby petting his dogs. He was playing a good-natured guy, someone who could just go along with a ridiculous plot like this. We couldn't all be in denial. I was going along with it because I was the cameraman, so of course I was. The cameraman can't be cautious or doubtful. Kimberly played the empathetic mama bear role, focusing on her desire to protect Anna and the rest of us. Logan played the cynic and the skeptic, who, despite his great doubts, was still curious enough to go along with everything. Antoine didn't want to be there, but he didn't want to be alone either. I felt we covered the spectrum of character reactions pretty well, though I didn't know how much screen time they were going to get to show it off. Most found footage tropes were designed to distract from a lack of characterization and common sense. I kept getting footage from all around, and I did it for one particular reason. I was on the lookout for a man wearing a long trench coat and a fedora. I didn't see him, despite my vigilance. I really needed to see him. I needed to look at his tropes. They would tell the story, perhaps even better than Camden could. That might have been exactly why Carousel was keeping him from me. I hadn't seen him at the daylight dance. I had been looking around, but he wasn't there, until we looked at the footage. That was fair play, I supposed, because it made some amount of sense with the rules of time travel. When I saw the man in the blue suit, I immediately turned my attention to him and pointed the camera at him to ensure we got a good shot. He was just an ordinary man, talking on the cell phone as he walked down the street. Little did he know that his life was about to change forever after getting hit on the noggin by a falling brick. Or at least, it would have. Just as he was walking up to the mercantile building, we were there. "Watch out," Antoine said before the man walked past us. He held his hand out. The man, whose name was ironically Ron Mason, according to the red wallpaper, stopped, apparently annoyed at the interruption. "Can't you see I'm on the PH?" he started to say, but before he could get the words out completely, a loud succession of thuds sounded as bricks fell from the top of the building and landed on the sidewalk right where he would have been. There was a look of alarm on his face that didn't quite go away. "Marcia, you would not believe it. I almost died. This building is falling apart right next to me. I almost got squished," he said. "Wouldn't have died completely," I said under my breath. "Just had trauma." He turned to look at us, to thank us, but he must have felt something odd about the group of strangers who were all huddled together, holding on to each other. "Did you see that?" he started to ask. Poor guy couldn't get out the sentence. At that moment, I started to see a red tinge in the air. While I thought it would be coming from the amulet, it actually kind of felt like it was coming from everywhere. Suddenly, I got this sensation in my stomach, like I had fallen. But I hadn't. I was standing still, holding on to Kimberly and Bobby, who was desperately holding on to his dogs. Again, I felt like I fell, but I didn't. "Whoa, Ron," the passerby said, tripping over himself and falling forward toward us. Antoine caught him before he could fall completely. And then the falling continued. But this time, when we fell, all of our surroundings started to shift. Suddenly, the day shot upward, and it was the middle of the night. Then it was day again, and we were standing in the same place, with solid ground underneath our feet. And yet, the sensation of falling continued, as if we were in a runaway elevator. The next two falls became more turbulent. This time, we didn't just fall, we changed location. We were still standing on the ground, but not in the same place. And I couldn't say where it was we were, because it was impossible. Even to describe it would be an unimaginable task. It was as if the place on Earth where our feet were planted was connected to a million different places all at once, circling us. And I could perceive all of them, like I was trapped in a kaleidoscope. And as we moved, the kaleidoscope changed. Buildings whirred past. Cars on the street flooded by so repeatedly that they became one solid mass, a blur of metal, lights, and paint so seamlessly blended together that it didn't even look like moving objects anymore. It just looked like a solid chunk of motion. In the sky, in the million skies, I saw airplanes everywhere. Lines of them, sometimes so numerous it looked like the sky had metal prongs running along it, the planes blurring together in my vision. We were moving in space quickly now too. Not just time, but the world itself was shifting around us. I fought through the mental fatigue, trying to understand what was happening, but the only takeaway was that this time travel implied some sort of innate intelligence. Even as that thought entered my mind, I didn't quite understand what it meant. Was this time travel itself intelligent? Or did it just appear that way? Wherever we stood, it was always in a place where humans normally stood. Even as we moved geographically, we were always on a sidewalk, in a street, never phasing through buildings, never colliding with cars. Even people never touched us. In fact, I didn't see other people at all. I only saw blurs of color and shape where people should have been, like outlines on park benches, fragments of motion. There were so many different things to see in the kaleidoscope of time that my mind simply could not comprehend it. I heard rushing water against a shoreline, but I saw nothing of the sort. It was information overload. My brain sought patterns, and there were patterns to see, but not to understand. Suddenly, we were standing on another sidewalk. A solid metal line of cars clogged the street. The colors and shapes I recognized as people began to sharpen, coming into view. As the kaleidoscope became more understandable and less frantic, I started to realize that our new position on the sidewalk seemed dictated by where all the blurs of color had been. We were finding a place where we could fit in without touching anyone. Intelligence. The thought lingered in my mind. This time travel magic is intelligent. Or perhaps it ran by rules that imitated intelligence in the bosom of infinity. It was like we were always in that moment, waiting for everything else to catch up with us. Suddenly, we were standing on a sidewalk filled with people. The solid metal streak of cars had separated. Now, there was just one car, 20 yards away, moving slowly as time became real again. As the final seconds ticked into place and our jump completed, the world started to speed up or slow down. I honestly couldn't tell. It was like the optical illusions where frames in a video slow down enough that you can finally tell how fast they had been moving before. I moved the camera to capture the car. And almost no one noticed us. The crowd was distracted by the race. The race. That's right. We were at an illegal drag race, where an accident almost happened. My thoughts finally caught up with my surroundings. And at that moment, I made eye contact with the driver of the red car speeding down the street. Though time had not yet returned to full speed, I could tell the car was handling poorly. The man was about to lose control. According to the article, he would regain control just in time, steering the vehicle away from the crowd and into a nearby building, saving them and sacrificing himself. But I made eye contact with him. I got his face right on camera. And as he saw us, panic, or maybe realization, flickered in his eyes. He knew we weren't supposed to be there. He saw that we had just appeared out of nothingness, a phenomenon that seemed selective. In all the footage I'd reviewed, no one had ever appeared out of nowhere. But to him, we must have simply blinked into existence. The driver kept looking at us. It was only for a few seconds. His souped-up street car was moving too fast. He didn't have time to correct his trajectory. Not with a distraction. The car kept going, careening to the left. This time, he didn't dodge the crowd. His red car smashed sideways into a group of people, flattening them. The car turned and rolled, crushing bodies underneath. The noise was deafening. I couldn't hear the snapping of bones, but there must have been. The way those people were flattened, shredded, and scooped up against the building beneath the wreckage, people screamed. I started screaming, yelling in shock. I didn't even remember what I said until I rewatched the video. No. Anna yelled. She was about to run toward the injured people, but we couldn't afford that. Kimberly grabbed her. No one was screaming louder than Ron, the NPC. Ron, who was not supposed to come with us into the past. Ron, who somehow managed to anyway. What just happened? He screamed. Marcia, do you hear me? Hello. The guy still had his phone to his ear. I looked at the others. As much as I wanted to panic at the mass death we had apparently caused, as much as I wanted to problem-solve the fact that we had accidentally taken a random NPC back into 2010 with us, I knew my job. I was the cameraman. And my job was to get the scene covered. I filmed everything as we walked away. Kimberly ushered us along. Anna was panicking. Logan was dumbstruck. Ant-Man cursed. Bobby comforted his dogs. They worried so much. My first thought was that we had to keep Ron with us. But Ron ran off, vanished into the chaos of the crowd. And I was too busy filming to stop him. Capturing every angle. Looking for our friend in the fedora. But I never saw him. We left. Running across town to the only place we knew would be safe. The jailhouse. As we approached, Anna ran to a board covering the back door and tugged at it. I'm sorry, she said. When I hid the tapes, that was how I got in. We've got everything under control, Kimberly said, pulling out an old pair of keys. We went to the front. Kimberly unlocked it. And we were back in the jailhouse. Safe. At least for a little while. Broken vertical bar stop,